I walked into my neighborhood bank to open a simple checking account, a cashier's check in my pocket, and a quiet afternoon ahead. 10 minutes later, a cop's leather glove cracked my jaw so hard the sound bounced off the marble like a pistol shot. Be honest. Have you ever watched a whole room decide what kind of person you are before you even finish your first sentence? Bellevue Avenue looks like a postcard they keep reprinting because nobody complains. Ancient oaks, overhead hedges trimmed like geometry problems, the kind of quiet that costs money, and neighbors who prefer their lives in beige. I had just moved into the old Hemlock estate, a stone manor that sat empty long enough to gather rumors. I paid in cash. I arrived in a 1965 Aston Martin DB5 because I like machines built by hands that cared. Mornings I jogged in a gray sweatsuit, waved at the gardeners, drank coffee on the veranda while the sun painted the stone. Evenings, if the air cooled just right, I might wear a red silk shirt that made color out of the twilight. That shirt, it bothered people who like their stories muted. You know what I mean? I could feel questions scraping my back when I walked by. No mortgage. What does he do? Why that car? Why here? Why him? They didn't ask. They decided. And once a neighborhood writes your biography in its head, spoilers don't matter. I'm not allergic to small talk, I just don't perform to qualify for a residence I already paid for. In certain zip codes, that refusal is its own kind of crime. Across town in a diner where the coffee tastes like it's been learning to be bitter for years, Officer Frank Miller liked to vent. 15 years on the force, jaw set like a straight edge, a man who sees the world in teams. Good guys and bad guys, us and them, rules and excuses. At a cracked vinyl booth, he met his echo, Brian Sterling, the new branch manager at Sterling Financial's Bellevue branch, a guy with a firm handshake that felt like an apology for his chin. Sterling wanted to be the kind of important that needs glass walls around an office to prove it. Miller wanted to feel the city bend when he walked his beat. They traded stories over burnt coffee and toast that never learned butter. "If he shows up in your bank, call me directly," Miller said, tapping the table like a gavel. And Sterling smiled, the kind of smile that borrows other people's power, and said, "You got it." That's the prologue nobody in the lobby got to hear. The day it happened, the Bellevue branch felt like a museum designed to make you whisper, polished Italian marble underfoot, a modern chandelier frozen mid-explosion overhead, air so cool it uprighted your posture. I wore the red silk shirt. Why not? I crossed the lobby, passed the line with a polite nod, and stopped at the concierge desk. "Good morning," I said, easy even. "I'd like to speak with the branch manager." "Do you have an appointment, sir?" The smile on her face was professional, 8 out of 10 sincere. "No, it should only take a moment. I'm a new resident. I'd like to open an account." She pressed a button, eyes doing quick math, and a moment later I was in a glass office with Brian Sterling. He stood extended, the practiced handshake guided me to a chair like he was seating me at a restaurant he owned. "Mr. Sterling," he said, "how can we help you today?" "My name is Julian Vance," I said, placing a slim leather portfolio on his desk. "I've recently moved into the neighborhood. I want to establish a relationship with your bank. Primary checking to start." I slid my driver's license across the desk, then a cashier's check. He picked up the ID, first eyes catching on Hemlock Estate, then he lifted the check. $2,500,000. He held it to the light as if light teaches finance. Something changed in his face. Not confusion, not caution. Certainty, the kind that arrives when prejudice finally finds a prop. "This is substantial," he said, voice tightening the syllables, standing at attention. "For your protection, we have verification protocols." "For a cashier's check from a prime bank," I asked, calm as glass. "Any issue with the instrument?" He didn't answer the question on the table. "If you'll excuse me," he said, and left his own office. Not to call the fraud department, to call a friend with a badge. Out in the hallway, thumb shaking on his phone, he whispered like a man discovering purpose. "He's here. The guy in the silk shirt. He's trying to deposit $2.5 million. It has to be fake." Here's something you learn if you live long enough. Rooms can change their minds without moving their furniture. The lobby stiffened. Conversations thinned. The teller stared too long at nothing. You could feel the air decide to hold its breath. 5 minutes later, the glass doors chimed and Officer Frank Miller strode in with a rookie at his shoulder, hand resting on the holster like a promise. Boots loud on marble because volume is power when you need it to be. His eyes found me the way a flashlight finds a suspect in a film you've seen before. "This the guy," he barked, voice the size of the room. "That's him." Sterling answered, the swagger he borrowed grown into his posture. He handed Miller the check like evidence in a case they were already sure about. He's trying to pass a fraudulent check. I turned my head slow, took them both in like I was measuring a frame that didn't fit the picture. Am I being detained, Mr. Sterling? It's just procedure, he said, which is what people say when they want the rules to do their thinking. You can wait out here. He wanted me visible. He wanted an audience. So I stood by the marble pillar and waited, the portfolio still in my hand, the red shirt louder now because the room had decided it meant something. Let me see some ID, Miller snapped, stepping into my space. And the check. I handed him my license. Sterling pushed the check into his other hand. Miller glanced down, then up, then down again. Julian Vance Hemlock Estate. And a check for $2.5 million. A laugh, short and ugly. You really thought you could pull this off? The check is valid, officer, I said, still even. You have my identification. I suggest you run it. Oh, I'll run it, he said, color rising in his face like a warning light. He looked at Sterling, and Sterling, catching courage like a cold, parroted, "This check is fake and you're a fraud." I looked at Sterling, let my voice drop half an inch. You are making a catastrophic mistake. That line hit Miller like water on a fuse. A spark, a sizzle, a decision he'd been dying to make. Don't you threaten him, boy, he snarled. The word wasn't an accident, it was permission. His fist came back leather, catching light, and then it landed. The sound cracked the lobby. The room gasped like one person. I didn't fall. Pain is bright and immediate, yes, but it's also tidy if you draw a line around it. I brought my head back to center, looked him in the eyes. You're under arrest for bank fraud and forgery, he yelled, grateful for the script. He twisted my arm. The rookie stumbled into place with the cuffs, and they paraded me through a sea of eyes that had already decided the ending. If it were you, if you tasted blood in the bank you were trying to join, if the man who hit you smirked because he thought the story was already written, what would you have done? The back seat of a patrol car is hard plastic designed to make you feel like an item in a container. The cuffs bite the same spot on your wrist, carving a memory. The rookie stared straight ahead like eye contact spreads consequences. Miller watched me in the rear view with the smallest smile the kind men wear when they think they've finally rearranged the world so it fits their hands. The precinct hits you with fluorescent lights that hum at a frequency designed for headaches. It smells like disinfectant over coffee, over fear. The desk sergeant looked at my shirt, at the swelling on my jaw, and at the line that said my name. Do you want to call a lawyer? A voice asked, like it was offering napkins. No, thank you. That confused him. They took my prints. They took my watch. They took my phone and slid it into a plastic bag. They took my photo in front of a wall of numbers and a camera flash that insisted on its own importance. Then they put me in a cell that knew only one song, Metal on Concrete. I sat, not leaning on the wall. Anger arrived clean and white-hot. I let it burn in my chest for a full minute. Then I took a breath, remembered why I never play short games in rooms built for other people's comfort, and let the heat chill into a blade. 1 hour later, a guard walked me to the phone like he was escorting a mistake back to the shelf. He stood close enough to hear, far enough to pretend he wasn't listening. I dialed a number. I know the way you know your own name. Chen, a crisp voice answered. David, I said, it's Julian. Silence. Then the sound of a chair straightening. Where are you? 4th Precinct downtown. I've been arrested. My voice stayed flat because panic is a poor negotiator. Listen carefully. Get a pen. I'm ready. First, secure all CCTV from Sterling Financial's Bellevue branch inside and out between 10 and 11 a.m. Do not request it. Take it. Call the corporate head of security directly. Use my name. Arrange a courier you hire to pick up the master files and bring them to you. I want them in our possession within the hour. Understood. Second, call Commissioner Thompson on his personal cell, not the office line. Tell him Officer Frank Miller, badge number 7, assaulted me on the bank floor prior to arrest. Tell him I am being held at the 4th Precinct and that if I am not in a clean room with bottled water in 15 minutes, the next call is to the governor. I have the number. I'll make the call. Third, assemble the team. Marcus Thorne on civil rights, Williams and Connolly on standby for corporate. Get the regional director for Sterling Financial on the phone. Richard Hayes. Pull his address. I want a process server standing by. Already moving. One more. Call General McMasters and let him know I need to reschedule our golf game tomorrow. David exhaled a smile I could hear. All right, he said, now fully in his lane. We're moving. Are you okay? My jaw needs attention. I'm fine. Execute. I hung up. The guard tried to look bored and failed. He had just learned a new word for the sound a phone makes when it becomes a weapon. Time for the twist. And if you've been listening closely, you might have guessed it already. Sterling Financial is a subsidiary of a parent company I chair. I'm the majority shareholder. So the man in the red silk shirt getting cuffed for a fraudulent check was the same man who signs the checks that keep their lights on. Yeah, that happened. Stick around because what happened next will blow your mind. Somewhere above the noise of officers walking paperwork in circles, a private line rang on a desk that only hears emergencies. Captain Howard Davies answered like his tongue had forgotten where to put vowels. The commissioner's chief of staff didn't waste syllables. You have Julian Vance in a holding cell. Davies fumbled the logbook. Bank fraud, he managed. Officer Miller brought him in. Assault, the voice snapped back. By your officer. You will personally release Mr. Vance immediately and unconditionally. You will apologize. You will provide anything he requests. Then you will locate Officer Miller, take his badge and gun, place him on administrative leave, and keep him there until further notice. I am on my way. Some orders don't travel. They arrive. 10 minutes later, a door opened and a guard who suddenly remembered how to be respectful led me to a conference room with a scuffed table, mismatched chairs, and a bottle of Fiji water sweating onto a paper napkin like an offering from a guilty conscience. Captain Davies walked in with a smile that looked like it was trying to leave his face. Mr. Vance, he started swallowing the dryness. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. You are, of course, free to go. We can have a car take you anywhere you'd like. All charges are being dropped. I'm not going anywhere, I said, twisting the cap off the water like it had done something wrong. Please have a seat, Captain, and send someone to bring in Brian Sterling from the bank and Officer Frank Miller. We're going to have a meeting. He blinked, then blinked again, then remembered how to nod. Yes, sir. He stumbled out, and the precinct began to move like a room trying not to catch on fire. Sterling arrived first, still living in the version of events where he was the hero in someone else's newsletter. He stepped into the doorway, and that version died. He saw me at the head of the table. He saw his captain at the far end looking like a retirement plan had just sprung a leak. What is this? He asked, voice too high for a man who thinks he's in charge. You'll understand soon, I said. He sat. Miller came in next, pushed by a sergeant who had been told to take his badge and gun. Confusion, then belligerence. Why am I in a room with him? He snapped, pointing at me like I was the problem in his day. Sit down, Frank Davies said, steel in his voice he hadn't wanted to use in years. Miller sat because authority works even when it feels wrong. The last to arrive wore a suit that knew how to fit a man with bad news. Mr. Vance, he said at once, not even glancing at the others, Richard Hayes, Regional Director for Sterling Financial. I came as soon as I heard. I am so sorry. Richard, I said with the kind of nod that says, we will talk about apologies later. Please have a seat. I believe you know your branch manager. Hayes turned to Sterling, and the muscle in his jaw tightened until it looked like a blueprint for consequences. In the corner, a young tech in a polo shirt had slipped in quietly with a laptop and an HDMI cable. David doesn't do halves. When he sends receipts, he sends a projector. Now that we're all here, I said, no hurry in the words, let's review the evidence. The tech tapped a key. The monitor on the wall came alive with a wide angle of the bank lobby. Audio crisp, picture clean. The machine designed to see a robbery had seen everything else instead. This, the guy Miller's voice thundered from the speakers. That's him, said Sterling's, the exact tone of a man mistaking suspicion for duty. He's trying to pass a fraudulent check. In our room, nobody moved. We watched ourselves. The posture, the small glances, the telling pause before the punch. The check is valid, officer, my voice on the video said. You have my identification. I suggest you run it. I think you're a fraud and this piece of paper is fake, Miller sneered on screen. Then Sterling, desperate to belong to the wrong team. This check is fake and you're a fraud. Hayes made a sound like an engine stalling. On screen, my warning landed. You are making a catastrophic mistake, Mr. Sterling. Then Miller's fist drew back and connected with my jaw. The sound of impact is worse on playback. It doesn't carry adrenaline. It carries physics. The room gasped in stereo. The tech paused the video on the frame where leather met bone. Nobody argued with pixels. They never blink. Mr. Hayes, I said into the silence that followed, as a board member of the bank's parent company, I am concerned about liability. As a customer who was assaulted in your lobby, I am more concerned about your personnel. What is your response to what we just watched? Hayes didn't ask for a recess. He turned. Brian, he said, voice stripped of anything but function. Clear out your desk. You are terminated effective immediately. Your credentials have already been revoked. Security will meet you at the branch to supervise removal of your personal items. Sterling tried to make air into an explanation, but I thought Hayes didn't let him finish. The check was a direct transfer from one of Mr. Vance's corporate accounts. He turned back to me. On behalf of the company, the door opened and a man with courtroom shoulders stepped in. Marcus Thorne crossed to the table and set a thick legal document in front of Miller. Officer Miller, he said, each word measured, you've been served. Civil action for assault, battery, false arrest, and violation of my client's civil rights. We are seeking damages of $10 million. Miller looked at the papers like they were a trick he hadn't practiced for. He glanced at Davies and found no rescue. He looked at me and found a mirror. Do you think that's fair? Too much, not enough. Tell me down below, because the math of consequence gets personal fast when the variables are your choices. What happened next wasn't loud. It was meticulous. The city attorneys allergic to scandal pressed for a settlement. Video doesn't negotiate. But I wasn't interested in a headline that fades. I wanted conditions. Miller resigned, forfeited his pension, and issued a written apology that ran in the city's largest paper. The number on the settlement will stay confidential because cities like their budgets stable, but let me say this. It hurt enough to be remembered. For Sterling, corporate didn't leave back doors open. His termination read for cause. In finance, those two words are a tattoo that shows through every shirt. The story traveled through back channels faster than any press release, and every door he knocked on already knew what answer to give. Within 6 months, he sold his house at a loss and moved 2 states away to take a job explaining fees to people who don't read the brochures. Ambition is a ladder. He found out what happens when you kick out a rung while you're standing on it. But ending it with 2 men would have been a very expensive kind of therapy. 2 men are symptoms. The system keeps breathing if you only treat the cough. I wanted the lungs. The settlement became seed money for the Vance Forward initiative. We funded independent civilian oversight for the police department with investigators and auditors who answered to a board that did not answer to me. We provided legal aid for victims of misconduct because justice should not require a retainer and a skyline view. We pushed the city council to adopt stricter use of force protocols and meaningful de-escalation training, monitored by third parties who had access to the data and the authority to publish it. Oversight with teeth, or its theater. Inside the bank, I changed the parts that touch the money and the people who want it. Quarterly implicit bias training for every single employee, from the teller who smiles at you through the glass to the executive who approves the credit policy. Not a video to click through. A measured curriculum tied to performance reviews with consequences that show up on bonus day. We built a community lending division empowered to make responsible loans in neighborhoods our algorithms had learned to ignore. We reworked hiring and promotion to find, grow, and elevate diverse talent, so our boardrooms stopped looking like a private club and started looking like the country we serve. Culture follows incentives. We rewired the incentives. Some nights I would drive Bellevue slowly, window down, letting the oak leaves talk in a language older than money. A neighbor waved. Real this time, not the kind of wave that says, I see you, but not as a person. Maybe he'd done his work. Maybe the world had. I waved back without requiring paperwork. You still with me? 'Cause here's something personal. I don't share to look noble. The morning after the conference room tribunal, my jaw ached so deep it made my eyes water when I chewed. The doctor said, rest it, ice it, no steak unless I wanted to drink it. I laughed because humor is a bridge you walk across when the ground underneath you is busy being complicated. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, traced the outline of the bruise as it spread like a storm on a weather map, and I remembered the first second after the punch. The stupid little smile I let slip inside myself. That smile wasn't bravado. It was a decision. I chose the long game when the room begged me to play short. Months later, the data started singing. Complaints down, compliance up, loan approvals increasing in zip codes we once called risky because we had trained our risk to memorize the wrong faces. But numbers are a rearview mirror. What matters is the view through the windshield. 1 year to the week after the arrest, I stood on the steps of the Sterling Financial Community Center in a neighborhood we had ignored for a generation. The ribbon had been cut already. Inside a whiteboard listed workshops, credit basics, small business accounting, after-school tutoring. A young black entrepreneur stood at the front of a room and pitched her second location. She had opened the first with a loan from our new community division. We didn't say yes because of charity. We said yes because the business worked, because we had changed the question from why not to how I sat in the back, listened, asked questions that found the spine of her plan. When she finished, the room clapped, not like a favor had just happened, but like a future had just gotten scheduled. People asked me after if I felt vindicated. I don't like that word. It sounds like a trophy you have to carry forever so people remember the game. I felt relief, the kind that loosens a knot you forgot you tied. I thought about Sterling maybe teaching people how to set up online banking in a strip mall 2 exits past his pride. I thought about Miller maybe reading his own printed apology in a kitchen that now smelled like modest jobs. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel triumph. They're not characters in my story anymore. They're a line item in the cost of progress. But let's not kid ourselves. The twist should never have been necessary. Justice shouldn't require a red silk shirt, a vintage car, a private line to a commissioner, a general on speed dial, and a seat on a board. That's the part that keeps me up sometimes. The ordinary version of this story, where the check is real, the ID is real, the man is real, and none of that is enough. So tell me, where you live, what actually works? Civilian review boards with teeth, body cams with community-controlled access, training tied to raises, diversions that measure success by harm reduced instead of arrests made. I want your receipts, not your wishes. I'll leave you with one last scene. Late evening. The Hemlock estate sits quiet in the kind of light that makes old stone look like it's breathing. I'm on the veranda, coffee gone cold, because sometimes you like the taste of the day even when it's over. I hear tires slow on the street, a car idling, then moving on. Not suspicious, curious. Neighborhoods learn. We all do if we decide to. Was the karma fitting for Officer Miller and Manager Sterling? Or did the city settle too easy and the bank adjust just enough to make next quarter comfortable? Do you believe in reform that changes behaviors, or punishment that changes careers? If it were your jaw, your record, your neighborhood, your bank, what would justice have looked like to you? If this story hit a nerve or made you see your own reflection in a lobby window, hit like so this reaches someone who needs it tonight. Drop a comment. Argue with me if you need to. I welcome it. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me the moment a room decided who you were and what you did next. Share this with someone who thinks power only swings one way. And if you want more stories that pull the curtain back and make us ask better questions, subscribe, stick around. We do this every week, and the next one might just be the one that changes the way you look at your street tomorrow morning.